Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to another episode here on the English Globe, the place where we explore the world, one story at a time, while also practicing and improving our English together. We are so happy to have you here with us today. Whether you are listening from your home, during your study time, on your way to work, or maybe even while relaxing with a cup of tea. Wherever you are now part of this learning journey, and we are so grateful to share this moment with you.
Yes, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. We want to remind you, before we dive into today's topic, to please take a second to like this video, subscribe to our channel The English Globe, and if you can, write a comment below to tell us where you are listening from. We love hearing from our community. Some of you are in Asia, others in Africa, Europe, or the Americas. And your words inspire us to keep bringing you more podcasts like this. Also, please share your thoughts about today's topic, because your opinions matter and make this conversation more alive.
Now, let's turn to today's topic, which is China and Brazil, economic partnership in South America. At first, you may think this sounds like a complicated subject, but don't worry, because together we will go step by step and explain everything in simple English. This way, you will not only learn about international relations and global economics, but also improve your vocabulary, your listening skills, and your ability to talk about important issues in English.
That's right. So why is this topic important? First, because China is the world's second largest economy, and Brazil is the largest economy in South America. When these two countries work together, the effect is not only felt inside their own borders, but across the entire region and even the world. For example, their trade in food, energy, and technology influences prices, creates jobs, and changes the way other countries also make decisions. Understanding this helps us see how connected our world really is.
Another reason this topic matters is because it shows us how countries from different continents, Asia and South America, can build strong partnerships. This is very important for students of English and international relations because it shows the power of cooperation, negotiation, and diplomacy. If you are preparing for exams like IELTS or TOEFL, or if you simply want to sound more confident when discussing global topics in English, this episode will give you useful words and ideas you can use.
Exactly, and we want you, dear listeners, to practice with us while listening. Try to note down some words you hear today, such as trade, partnership, investment, agriculture, technology, and infrastructure. These are words you will hear many times when reading international news in English. The more familiar you are with them, the easier it will be for you to understand articles, reports, and conversations about the global economy.
We should also say that our goal is not to tell you who is right or wrong in politics, or to make any kind of political judgment. Instead, our goal is to explain facts and ideas in a way that helps you, as an English learner, to grow in knowledge and language ability. We want this podcast to be both educational and enjoyable, so you feel that every time you join us, you are improving your English while learning something new about the world.
Before we go further, let's pause for a moment to remind you once again. Please subscribe to the English Globe if you haven't already, and click the like button to support our work. These small actions really help our channel grow, and they allow us to continue creating more long and detailed episodes for you. And don't forget to comment below. Tell us the country you are listening from, because we are building a global community of learners, and it's beautiful to see all of us connected in this way.
Wonderful. So now that we have set the stage, let's get ready to dive deeper. We will explore how China and Brazil first built their partnership, how trade grew between them, and how this partnership affects not just South America, but also the wider world. By the end of this podcast, you will not only understand more about China and Brazil's economic relations, but also feel more confident discussing such topics in English. To truly understand the importance of the partnership between China and Brazil today, we first need to look back at history, because every strong relationship has roots in the past, and the story of these two countries is no exception. When we speak about history and international relations, We are not only talking about dates and events, but also about the gradual building of trust, the exchange of culture, and the decisions that shaped the path forward.
That's very true, Adam. And for our listeners, let's begin with a clear and simple explanation of what diplomatic relations mean. Diplomatic relations are the formal connections that two governments establish with each other. These connections include opening embassies, sending ambassadors, and starting official conversations on political, cultural, or economic issues. Without diplomatic relations, two countries may trade a little, but their partnership will always remain limited and less official.
Exactly. And when we talk about bilateral trade, another important term, we mean the exchange of goods and services between two countries. Bilateral simply means between two sides, so in this case, between China and Brazil. For example, if Brazil exports soybeans and iron ore to China, and China exports electronics and machinery to Brazil, this back and forth is called bilateral trade. These simple ideas will help us follow the story more clearly.
Now let's go back in time. In the early years of the 20th century, China and Brazil did not have very close relations, mainly because China was going through political changes and internal struggles, while Brazil was also developing its economy and identity within South America. At that stage, most of Brazil's external connections were focused on Europe and the United States, while China was more concerned with its own regional issues in Asia.
Yes, and during the first half of the 1900s, both countries were still finding their place in the global order. China was undergoing massive transformations, including the end of imperial rule, the rise of the Republic of China, and later the establishment of the People's Republic of China in 1949. Brazil, on the other hand, was emerging as a regional power in Latin America, trying to modernize its economy while balancing political challenges at home.
A key turning point came when Brazil officially recognized the People's Republic of China in 1974. Recognition is an important step in diplomacy because it means one government officially accepts another as the legitimate representative of its people. For nearly 25 years after 1949, Brazil, like many countries in the West, did not recognize the new Chinese government. But in 1974, Brazil changed its policy, and this opened the door for stronger diplomatic and economic ties.
That recognition was really significant, because once Brazil and China established diplomatic relations, they could start exchanging ambassadors, creating agreements, and discussing how to grow their partnership. From that moment, their relationship began to move beyond just words or symbolic gestures. They started building concrete projects together, which gradually increased trust and prepared the ground for a deeper economic partnership that we see today.
Another turning point came in the 1980s and 1990s, when both countries were changing in major ways. China had started its process of economic reform under Deng Xiaoping, moving away from a closed, centrally planned system toward a more open, market-oriented approach. Brazil, meanwhile, was going through political transitions after years of military rule, and it was opening its economy to more global trade. This created the perfect opportunity for the two nations to connect more strongly.
And during these decades, trade between China and Brazil began to expand. At first, the volumes were not very large, but the foundation was laid. Brazil started to send more raw materials, such as minerals and agricultural goods, to China, while China sent manufactured products and technology to Brazil. This exchange is the beginning of what we now call a complementary trade relationship, meaning that each country offers what the other needs most.
By the time we reached the early 2000s, the relationship had grown even more important. China's rapid economic growth created huge demand for resources like iron ore and soybeans, which Brazil could supply in abundance. On the other hand, Brazil needed affordable manufactured goods, electronics, and investment in infrastructure, which China could provide. This was when bilateral trade between the two countries really started to expand at a very fast pace.
Yes, and it's important to note that their partnership was not only about economics. The two countries also started cooperating more closely in international organizations, especially after the creation of BRICS, which stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. This group was formed to give emerging economies a stronger voice in global affairs, and Brazil and China used it as a platform to coordinate their positions and support each other diplomatically.
When we put all these pieces together, we see that the historical background of China and Brazil's partnership is really a story of gradual progress. At first, they had little contact, then they recognized each other, then they started small exchanges, and finally, they developed into close partners in both trade and diplomacy. This shows us that international relations are rarely built overnight. They take time, patience, and consistent effort from both sides.
For our dear listeners who are learning English, this historical journey also teaches us how to use key vocabulary in context. Words like diplomatic relations, recognition, bilateral trade, and partnership are not only useful in understanding the China-Brazil case, but also in many other global relationships. If you learn how to use these terms correctly, you will find it easier to follow news, academic discussions, and even exams that involve international topics.
That's such a great point. So to summarize this section, early on, China and Brazil did not interact much. But over time, political recognition, economic needs, and global changes brought them closer together. Their history shows us how two countries from very different regions and backgrounds can build a lasting and meaningful partnership. This is the foundation on which the present and future of their economic cooperation has been built.
Now that we've explored the historical background of relations between China and Brazil, it's time to look at one of the most important dimensions of their partnership: trade. Trade is at the very heart of their connection, and when we say trade, we are talking about the exchange of goods and services between the two countries. In this section, we will focus on numbers, key products, and the overall impact of trade on their economies.
That's right, Adam. And let's start by giving our listeners a simple definition of trade terms. Exports are the goods a country sells to another, and imports are the goods a country buys from another. So when we say Brazil exports soybeans to China, it means Brazil is selling soybeans to China. When we say Brazil imports electronics from China, it means Brazil is buying electronics from China. Understanding these words makes it easier to follow economic discussions.
Exactly, Julia. Now, one of the most striking facts is that today, China is Brazil's largest trading partner. This means no other country buys more goods from Brazil than China, and no other country sells as many goods to Brazil as China does. This is a big change compared to the past, because for many years, the United States and European countries used to be Brazil's main trading partners. The rise of China has completely shifted this balance.
Let's talk about some numbers. In recent years, the value of trade between China and Brazil has grown to more than $100 billion annually. That is an enormous amount of money, and it reflects the strong demand on both sides. Brazil depends heavily on China to buy its agricultural products and minerals, while China depends on Brazil to supply the resources it needs to keep its industries and its population growing.
The main products Brazil exports to China are soybeans, iron ore, and crude oil. Soybeans are used in China for food, especially for making animal feed, which supports China's massive livestock industry. Iron ore is the key ingredient for producing steel, which is essential for construction, cars, and machinery. Oil is, of course, a critical resource for energy. These three products alone make up a very large portion of Brazil's sales to China.
And on the other side, China exports a wide range of manufactured goods to Brazil. These include electronics like smartphones, computers, and home appliances, as well as industrial machinery, vehicles, and chemicals. For Brazil, These imports are important because they support both consumer demand and industrial development. People in Brazil buy Chinese products for their homes, while companies use Chinese machinery to keep their businesses running.
What makes this trade relationship interesting is that it is highly complementary. That means the strengths of one country match the needs of the other. Brazil is rich in natural resources, farmland, and energy, but it does not produce as many manufactured goods. China, on the other hand, has strong industries that can produce large amounts of goods at lower cost, but it needs resources and food to sustain its growth. This natural fit explains why their trade has expanded so quickly.
Another important point is how this trade impacts jobs and the economy in both countries. In Brazil, millions of jobs in farming, mining, and shipping depend on exports to China. Farmers grow soybeans not only for local consumption but also for Chinese buyers. Miners extract iron ore because Chinese factories need it. At the same time, in China, millions of workers in factories build electronics and machinery, and part of their income comes from products that are exported to Brazil.
For English learners, it's also useful to learn the term trade balance. This refers to the difference between the value of exports and imports. If a country exports more than it imports, it has a trade surplus. If it imports more than it exports, it has a trade deficit. In the case of Brazil and China, Brazil often has a trade surplus because the value of its exports to China, especially soybeans and iron ore, is very high compared to what it imports.
That's a great explanation, Adam. Another useful concept is commodity trade. Commodities are raw materials such as metals, oil, or agricultural products. Brazil's trade with China is heavily based on commodities. This makes the relationship very valuable but also risky, because commodity prices can rise and fall depending on global demand, weather conditions, or political issues. When prices are high, Brazil earns more money, but when they fall, Brazil's economy can feel the pain.
China also benefits from these commodities because it secures a stable supply of resources needed for its industries. For example, China buys a very large portion of Brazil's soybeans each year, sometimes more than 70% of Brazil's total soybean exports. This shows how much China depends on Brazil to feed its population and livestock. It also shows how much Brazil depends on China as its main buyer, which creates a strong but delicate link.
It's also important to recognize that this trade relationship has expanded beyond just buying and selling. China has made investments in Brazilian ports, railways, and storage facilities to make the flow of trade faster and cheaper. This shows that trade is not only about moving goods, but also about building infrastructure that supports future exchanges. These investments also bring benefits to Brazil because they improve the country's ability to move goods within its own borders.
For our listeners, here is another useful term: trade diversification. This means spreading trade across many different products and countries instead of depending too much on one. One of Brazil's challenges is that it relies heavily on China and on a small group of commodities. While this has been profitable, it also creates risk. If China's demand slows, or if global prices fall, Brazil's economy could face serious problems. This is something economists always keep in mind.
Yes, and China faces its own challenges as well. By depending heavily on Brazilian commodities, China must be careful about supply security. For example, if climate change or environmental issues affect Brazil's crops, China's food supply could be at risk. This is why China also buys soybeans from the United States and other countries, even if Brazil remains its largest supplier. In international trade, having multiple partners helps reduce risk.
To sum up this section, the trade relationship between China and Brazil is one of the strongest in the world between a country in Asia and a country in South America. It is built on a complementary exchange. Brazil sends resources and food, while China sends manufactured goods and technology. This trade is worth hundreds of billions of dollars and affects millions of people in both countries. Understanding these numbers helps us see why their partnership is so important.
And for you, dear listeners, this is also a valuable lesson in both English and international knowledge. By learning words like exports, imports, bilateral trade, trade surplus, commodities, and diversification, you are building a vocabulary set that will help you in many conversations and in understanding global news. Always remember, the more you connect language with real-world examples, the stronger your learning will be.
Now that we have discussed how trade between China and Brazil has grown over the years, let's take a closer look at another very important part of their economic partnership, which is investment and infrastructure. These two areas go hand in hand because investment brings the money and resources needed for development, while infrastructure provides the physical systems that allow an economy to function properly. Without strong infrastructure, even the best trade relationship cannot reach its full potential.
That's a great starting point, Adam. For our listeners, let's define the word infrastructure in simple terms. Infrastructure refers to the basic systems and structures a country needs to support its economy and daily life. This includes roads, railways, ports, airports, power plants, and communication networks. Without good infrastructure, moving goods, providing services, and connecting people becomes very difficult. So when we talk about Chinese investment in Brazilian infrastructure, we are talking about money and projects that help improve these systems.
Another important word here is foreign investment. This simply means money that comes from another country to support projects in a different place. When Chinese companies or banks put money into building a railway in Brazil, that is foreign investment. It is different from local investment because the source of funds is not from Brazil itself, but from an external partner. Foreign investment can bring many benefits, but it also raises questions about control, influence, and long-term impact.
In the case of Brazil, Chinese investment has focused heavily on infrastructure related to trade and energy. For example, China has invested in Brazilian ports, which are the entry and exit points for goods moving across the ocean. Better ports mean that ships can carry more goods, load and unload faster, and reduce costs for both buyers and sellers. Since Brazil exports so many products to China, especially soybeans, iron ore, and oil, efficient ports are essential for keeping trade flowing smoothly.
Railways are another area where Chinese investment has played a big role. Brazil is a huge country with vast distances between its farms, mines, and coastal ports. Transporting goods over such long distances has always been a challenge, especially when roads are crowded or in poor condition. By building or improving railway networks, Chinese investment helps Brazil move large quantities of goods more quickly and at lower cost. This not only benefits trade with China, but also improves transportation inside Brazil itself.
Energy is also a very important area of cooperation. China has invested in Brazil's electricity sector, including hydroelectric plants, solar power, and wind energy projects. Brazil already has a strong tradition in renewable energy, but Chinese support brings new technology and financing that makes these projects larger and more effective. At the same time, China also invests in oil and gas exploration in Brazil, because energy security is critical for both countries' futures.
Let's also mention telecommunications, because that is another key part of infrastructure. Chinese companies, especially Huawei, have played a significant role in building Brazil's communication networks, including mobile internet systems and future 5G technology. Strong communication networks are essential not only for businesses, but also for education, healthcare, and social life. For English learners, this shows how broad the word infrastructure can be, covering everything from transportation to energy to communications.
For Brazil, these investments bring many benefits. They create jobs during construction, they improve efficiency in trade and business, and they provide modern technology that might otherwise be too expensive. For example, when a new railway is built, thousands of workers are employed, local businesses provide materials, and once completed, the railway continues to serve farmers, miners, and exporters for many years. In this way, investment is not only about money, but also about long-term growth.
From China's perspective, these investments also make sense. By supporting Brazil's infrastructure, China ensures that the flow of commodities like soybeans and iron ore remains stable and reliable. If Brazil has better railways and ports, then Chinese companies can get the resources they need more quickly and cheaply. This is a win-win situation, because both sides gain something valuable. Brazil gains infrastructure and development, while China gains secure access to resources.
Of course, we should also talk about some of the challenges. One challenge is the question of dependency. If Brazil relies too heavily on Chinese investment, some people worry that it may give China too much influence over Brazil's economy. For example, if most of Brazil's ports or power plants are financed and managed by Chinese companies, then decisions in those areas may be influenced by Chinese interests. This is why some Brazilian leaders say the country needs to balance foreign investment with local control.
Another challenge is environmental impact. Large infrastructure projects, such as building railways through forests or expanding ports near sensitive ecosystems, can sometimes harm the environment. Brazil is home to the Amazon rainforest, which is extremely important for the global climate. If infrastructure development is not managed carefully, it can contribute to deforestation, pollution, or loss of biodiversity. This creates tension between the goals of economic growth and environmental protection.
A useful term here for our listeners is sustainable development. This means building economic growth in a way that does not damage the environment or harm future generations. Many experts say that Brazil and China must work together to make sure their investments follow the principles of sustainable development. For example, building railway routes that avoid sensitive areas, using clean energy in construction, and including environmental protection plans in every project.
For learners, another good concept to remember is infrastructure gap. This phrase means the difference between the infrastructure a country currently has and the infrastructure it needs for full economic growth. Brazil has a large infrastructure gap because its transport systems, energy networks, and communication systems often cannot meet the demands of a modern, growing economy. Chinese investment is helping to close this gap, but it remains a challenge that requires continued attention.
To sum up this section, the story of investment and infrastructure between China and Brazil shows us how economic partnerships go beyond simple trade. It is not only about buying and selling goods, but also about building the systems that make trade possible in the first place. Ports, railways, energy plants, and communication networks are all part of the foundation of modern economies. And with China's investment, Brazil is strengthening that foundation for the future.
And for you, dear listeners, this is another opportunity to learn and practice new vocabulary. Words like infrastructure, foreign investment, telecommunications, sustainable development, and infrastructure gap are extremely useful in international discussions. By understanding these words and their connection to real-world examples like China and Brazil, you are preparing yourself to take part in meaningful conversations in English about global issues. Dear listeners, now we move into one of the most exciting areas of the China-Brazil relationship, which is technology and energy cooperation. In today's world, both technology and energy are not just simple industries, but the engines that power growth, jobs, and future development. When two nations cooperate in these fields, they are investing not only in trade, but in the future of their societies. For Brazil, learning from China's experience is especially important because China has transformed itself from a largely agricultural economy into one of the world's leading technology powers, and this transition offers valuable lessons.
One key aspect is Brazil's interest in what is called technology transfer. This phrase might sound complex, but it simply means that one country shares knowledge, skills, or equipment with another country to help it develop faster. Brazil has strong industries in agriculture and energy, but in fields like digital technology and advanced telecommunications, it still faces challenges. China, however, has become a leader in these areas, especially in mobile networks, e-commerce, and artificial intelligence. So, Brazil looks to China for cooperation that allows it to adopt new methods, build infrastructure, and improve education in science and engineering.
A clear example of this cooperation is Huawei, the major Chinese telecommunications company that has become a major player in Brazil's technology sector. Huawei not only sells equipment for mobile and internet networks, but also invests in training programs for Brazilian engineers and technicians. This means the cooperation goes beyond buying and selling. It creates opportunities for knowledge sharing and the development of human capital. Human capital refers to the skills, experience, and education that people bring to the economy, and building this is crucial for any country that wants long-term progress.
Technology cooperation is only one part of the picture, because energy is also central to the China-Brazil partnership. Both countries are working closely on renewable energy projects, including wind farms, solar energy plants, and hydropower. Brazil has enormous natural potential in these areas because of its rivers, sunshine, and wide open spaces. China contributes with financing, technology, and expertise that make these projects possible. This is especially important today as the world faces the urgent challenge of reducing carbon emissions and building more sustainable energy systems for the future.
However, we should also remember that Brazil is one of the biggest oil producers in South America, and this creates another layer of cooperation with China. On one hand, Brazil exports large amounts of oil to China, which needs energy to support its massive economy. On the other hand, Chinese companies are investing in Brazil's oil exploration and infrastructure, which strengthens Brazil's capacity to produce and export. This balance between renewable energy and oil reflects the real complexity of modern energy relations. Countries must both meet current demands and prepare for a cleaner future at the same time.
When we put these elements together, the picture becomes very clear. The technology and energy cooperation between China and Brazil is not just about economics, but about building stronger foundations for the future. It connects digital growth, environmental responsibility, and long-term planning. For English learners, this section shows us new terms like technology transfer, renewable energy, and human capital, all of which are important in international discussions. More importantly, it demonstrates how two countries on different continents can create trust and share knowledge in ways that benefit both sides for decades to come.
Dear listeners, let us now turn to agriculture, which is one of the most important pillars of the China-Brazil relationship, because food is the foundation of life and the most basic need for every country. China has the largest population in the world, with more than 1 billion people, and feeding such a population requires an enormous amount of food every single day. China produces a lot domestically, but its farmland is limited and often challenged by factors such as water scarcity, soil quality, and urban expansion. So it must rely on strong agricultural partners to meet its growing demand.
Brazil has become one of the world's largest food suppliers and plays a critical role in feeding China's population. The most important product in this partnership is soybeans, which are used not only for cooking oil, but also as animal feed for pigs and chickens. China imports vast amounts of soybeans from Brazil every year because they are essential for its meat production industry, and this demand has created enormous opportunities for Brazilian farmers. Over the years, soybean exports have grown into a cornerstone of bilateral trade, showing how agriculture connects the two economies directly.
Beyond soybeans, Brazil also exports beef and poultry to China, and this has made Brazil one of China's most trusted suppliers of protein. As China's middle class has grown wealthier, their diets have shifted from being mostly grain-based to including more meat, and this change has multiplied the demand for animal products. Brazil's cattle ranches and poultry farms have stepped in to fill this need, exporting millions of tons of beef and chicken every year. For many Brazilian farmers, Chinese demand has meant more income, more jobs, and more investment in modern farming equipment.
From Brazil's perspective, this agricultural trade has brought major benefits to rural communities. Farmers in regions like Mato Grosso and Paraná have seen their livelihoods improve because of exports to China. New roads, storage facilities, and shipping ports have been built to support the massive flow of soybeans, beef, and poultry across the Pacific Ocean. In addition, the income from these exports allows farmers to invest in technology such as modern tractors, irrigation systems, and advanced seeds, which increases productivity and makes Brazil even more competitive in the global agricultural market.
But this agricultural boom also comes with challenges, and one of the biggest is environmental sustainability. Large areas of Brazil's Amazon rainforest and Cerrado grasslands have been cleared for soybean farming and cattle ranching, and this deforestation has caused serious concerns worldwide. Cutting down forests not only destroys biodiversity, but also contributes to climate change by releasing large amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. For China, this creates a dilemma, because while it needs Brazilian food to feed its people, it also faces international pressure to make sure its supply chains are sustainable and environmentally responsible.
Both China and Brazil have started to discuss solutions to balance food production with environmental protection. Some of these include stricter regulations on deforestation, better monitoring systems, and encouraging sustainable farming practices. International organizations and NGOs are also involved, urging both countries to ensure that agricultural expansion does not come at the cost of the planet's health. For students listening today, this shows us an important lesson. International trade is not only about profits, but also about responsibility, because every trade relationship has consequences that go beyond economics and touch the environment and society.
In conclusion, the agricultural relationship between China and Brazil demonstrates the deep interdependence between countries in the modern world. China depends on Brazil to secure the food supplies that keep its population healthy and stable, while Brazil depends on Chinese demand to support its farmers and rural communities. This mutual reliance has made agriculture one of the strongest bonds between the two nations, but it also highlights the importance of making choices that are sustainable and fair. The challenge is not only to feed people today, but to protect resources so that future generations can also be fed tomorrow. Dear listeners, now we enter an important aspect of the China-Brazil partnership that goes beyond economics and trade, and this is the political and diplomatic dimension. Political relations refer to how governments interact with each other to make decisions, agreements, and policies that guide cooperation, while diplomacy is the art of managing these interactions through dialogue, negotiation, and strategic partnerships. For China and Brazil, strong political ties are essential because they help maintain stability, trust, and predictability, allowing both nations to pursue long-term economic and social goals with confidence and mutual understanding.
Brazil has always been recognized as a key leader in South America because of its large population, strong economy, and active role in regional organizations such as Mercosur and the Organization of American States. This leadership role gives Brazil influence over its neighbors and allows it to represent South American interests in global discussions. For China, building a strong partnership with Brazil is not only about trade, but also about gaining a strategic entry point into the wider region. By cooperating with Brazil, China can expand its influence across Latin America while maintaining positive relations with governments that share common economic goals.
One strategy that China uses to strengthen its presence in Latin America is called soft power. Unlike hard power, which involves military or coercive force, soft power is the ability to attract and persuade other countries through culture, diplomacy, investment, and educational programs. In Brazil, China's soft power includes funding scholarships for Brazilian students to study in China, supporting cultural exchanges, providing technology training, and making large investments in infrastructure and energy. This approach helps China build long-term influence while maintaining positive relations that are based on mutual benefit rather than pressure or coercion.
Another key platform for political and diplomatic cooperation is BRICS, which includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. This group was created to give emerging economies a stronger voice in global affairs, particularly in finance, trade, and sustainable development. For Brazil, BRICS offers an opportunity to collaborate with other major economies outside the traditional Western-led structures, such as the G7 or the International Monetary Fund. For China, it provides a platform to coordinate with influential partners, share development models, and strengthen ties with strategically important nations like Brazil that have resources and regional influence.
However, the relationship between Brazil and China must also be understood in the context of Brazil's ties with the United States, which remains its largest trading partner outside Latin America and an important security ally. Brazil faces a balancing act. It benefits from strong economic and political cooperation with China, yet it also values its long-standing diplomatic, trade, and security relations with the United States. Maintaining this balance requires careful diplomacy, transparent communication, and strategic decision-making to avoid conflicts or tensions that could undermine Brazil's interests or its credibility in the international arena.
This balancing act is particularly important in areas such as trade policy, technology, and regional security. For example, Brazil must manage how much influence China has in critical infrastructure projects, while also keeping the United States confident that its interests are respected. Similarly, Brazil's participation in international forums like the United Nations or climate negotiations often requires careful coordination, so that partnerships with both China and the United States are constructive rather than competitive. This careful diplomacy demonstrates Brazil's maturity as a regional leader capable of navigating complex global relationships.
Another aspect to consider is public perception and domestic politics in Brazil. Chinese investment and influence are sometimes viewed with caution by local media, political parties, and civil society groups that are concerned about dependency or environmental issues. Brazilian leaders must therefore communicate clearly with their citizens about the benefits of Chinese cooperation, such as infrastructure development, technology transfer, and job creation, while also addressing legitimate concerns about sovereignty, environmental protection, and long-term sustainability.
On the other hand, China also benefits from positive political and diplomatic engagement with Brazil, because it strengthens trust, ensures reliable supply chains, and opens doors for future collaborations in education, energy, agriculture, and technology. These engagements include high-level visits by government officials, participation in joint commissions and working groups, and the signing of bilateral agreements covering a wide range of sectors. Through these structured and repeated interactions, both countries build a framework for long-term cooperation that goes far beyond simple trade.
For English learners, this section introduces important vocabulary such as diplomacy, soft power, balance, bilateral agreements, regional influence, and strategic partnership. Understanding these terms helps you follow not only the China-Brazil relationship, but also many other international relationships, because politics and diplomacy are central to global interactions. By paying attention to how nations manage partnerships, conflicts, and shared goals, you gain a better understanding of international relations and the role of communication, negotiation, and trust in shaping the world order.
In conclusion, the political and diplomatic dimensions of the China-Brazil partnership are a complex, multifaceted, and essential part of their cooperation. Brazil's leadership in South America, China's use of soft power, joint participation in BRICS, and the careful balancing of ties with the United States all demonstrate that international relations involve more than trade alone. They are about strategy, influence, trust, and long-term planning. And this understanding is vital for anyone who wants to study international relations, economics, or global politics while also improving their English skills in a real-world context.
Dear listeners, while the China-Brazil partnership has many benefits in trade, technology, and energy, it also faces significant challenges that both countries must navigate carefully to maintain a balanced and sustainable relationship. One of the main challenges is trade imbalances, which occur when one country exports far more than it imports from the other. In this case, Brazil relies heavily on China to buy soybeans, iron ore, and other commodities, creating a situation where the Brazilian economy can become too dependent on Chinese demand, and any sudden change in China's needs or global prices could have serious economic consequences.
Another challenge arises from political differences and domestic criticism in Brazil. While the government seeks to strengthen ties with China, some political parties, media outlets, and civil society groups have raised concerns about sovereignty, influence, and transparency. Critics argue that by relying too much on China for trade, investment, and technology, Brazil could face external pressure in decision-making or become vulnerable to political and economic influence. This creates a constant need for careful diplomacy, strategic planning, and clear communication between leaders, ensuring that the partnership benefits Brazil without undermining its autonomy.
Environmental challenges are another critical concern in the China-Brazil relationship. Much of Brazil's agricultural and energy expansion, which is fueled by Chinese demand and investment, occurs in sensitive regions such as the Amazon rainforest and the Cerrado grasslands. Large-scale soybean farming, cattle ranching, and infrastructure projects contribute to deforestation, habitat loss, and greenhouse gas emissions, which have both local and global implications. Managing these environmental challenges requires strong regulation, monitoring, and sustainable practices to balance economic growth with conservation, which is a major focus for both countries.
Another area of concern is over-reliance on Chinese investment. Brazil has benefited greatly from foreign capital in infrastructure, technology, and energy. But depending too much on one partner can create financial and strategic vulnerabilities. If global or domestic political conditions shift, or if Chinese companies change their priorities, Brazil could face delays or disruptions in critical projects. Economists and policymakers often stress the importance of trade and investment diversification, encouraging Brazil to build partnerships with multiple countries while continuing to maintain a constructive and cooperative relationship with China.
In addition, these challenges are interconnected, meaning that trade dependency, political pressure, environmental issues, and investment reliance all influence each other. For example, if environmental concerns lead to stricter regulations on farming or mining, Chinese investment may slow down, affecting exports and the income of Brazilian farmers and companies. Similarly, political criticism at home can affect decisions on bilateral agreements or joint projects. This complex web of factors shows how international partnerships require careful balancing of interests, responsibilities, and long-term vision.
For English learners, this section introduces several important terms that are used in international relations and economics, such as trade imbalance, dependency, sovereignty, environmental sustainability, over-reliance, and regulation. Understanding these words and concepts helps you follow global news and discussions about international partnerships. It also illustrates how economic, political, and environmental factors are closely linked in the real world, and how countries must work together while protecting their own interests and resources.
In conclusion, the China-Brazil partnership is powerful and mutually beneficial, but it is not without challenges. Trade imbalances, political differences, environmental concerns, and the risk of over-reliance on Chinese investment all require careful management. Both nations must adopt strategies that ensure sustainability, economic stability, and social responsibility while continuing to grow cooperation in trade, technology, energy, and culture. By understanding these challenges, listeners can see that successful international relations involve careful planning, dialogue, and awareness of potential risks. Dear listeners, as we move toward the future of the China-Brazil partnership, it is clear that the possibilities for growth and deeper collaboration are extensive, particularly in areas like technology, renewable energy, and digital trade, because both nations are actively looking to expand their cooperation beyond traditional commodities and infrastructure into high-tech industries and sustainable energy solutions that can support long-term economic development while addressing global challenges such as climate change and resource efficiency.
One area with significant potential is technology and green energy cooperation, where Brazil can benefit from China's experience in renewable energy, artificial intelligence, and smart infrastructure. For example, China has invested heavily in solar, wind, and hydro projects, as well as energy-efficient technologies, which Brazil can adopt to modernize its energy systems and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This kind of collaboration also provides opportunities for research, knowledge exchange, and skill building for Brazilian professionals, strengthening the human capital needed for the future.
Another important element in Brazil's future role is its participation in China's Belt and Road Initiative, which aims to create global trade and investment networks connecting Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Brazil's geographic and economic importance makes it a key partner in South America, providing access to major ports, natural resources, and markets for Chinese companies. Engagement in this initiative allows Brazil to attract investment in infrastructure, transportation, and logistics, while simultaneously improving its regional connectivity and trade efficiency, which can boost both domestic development and international influence.
Opportunities for deeper integration also exist in finance and digital trade, because both China and Brazil are exploring ways to strengthen financial cooperation, such as banking partnerships, currency exchange arrangements, and investment funds. Digital trade, including e-commerce, online services, and digital payments, is a rapidly growing sector that can open new markets for Brazilian businesses while allowing China to expand its digital economy abroad. By embracing these opportunities, both nations can diversify their trade portfolio, reduce dependency on traditional sectors, and create innovative channels for economic growth that are better suited to the 21st century.
Long-term implications of this partnership for South America's economic future are profound, because Brazil's close cooperation with China can help the region become more integrated into global supply chains and more resilient in a rapidly changing world economy. Increased trade, technology transfer, and infrastructure development may encourage other South American nations to strengthen their economic and diplomatic ties with China, creating a broader network of collaboration. At the same time, Brazil must maintain balance with traditional partners like the United States and the European Union, ensuring that regional development is sustainable, diversified, and mutually beneficial.
For English learners, this section introduces key vocabulary such as renewable energy, Belt and Road Initiative, digital trade, financial integration, infrastructure development, and long-term planning. Understanding these terms helps you follow global discussions and economic forecasts, while also linking language learning to real-world international relations. By focusing on both opportunities and responsibilities, this section shows how strategic vision, innovation, and cooperation can shape the future of countries and regions alike.
In conclusion, the future prospects for the China-Brazil partnership are promising and multifaceted, with potential for growth in technology, renewable energy, finance, and digital trade. Brazil's participation in global initiatives, its leadership in South America, and the ongoing exchange of knowledge and investment can create a more integrated, resilient, and sustainable economic landscape. For listeners, this highlights that international partnerships are dynamic, forward-looking, and crucial not only for trade, but also for shaping the long-term trajectory of nations and regions. Dear listeners, as we conclude our discussion on the China-Brazil partnership, it is important to reflect on the many key points we have explored throughout this podcast. We have seen how trade, investment, technology, energy, agriculture, and diplomacy all connect to create a complex and multifaceted relationship that benefits both countries while presenting unique challenges. Understanding these connections helps us appreciate the dynamics of international cooperation and the careful planning needed to maintain strong partnerships in today's globalized world.
One of the most remarkable lessons from this partnership is how globalization works in practice. Because globalization is not just a word, but a process that links countries through trade, culture, technology, and diplomacy. Brazil and China, despite being continents apart, rely on each other for food, energy, investment, and knowledge, showing that economic growth, technological progress, and social development increasingly depend on international cooperation. This real-world example demonstrates that no nation operates in isolation, and that global interdependence shapes the opportunities and risks of today's world.
For English learners, this discussion also offers an opportunity to expand vocabulary in areas such as trade, economics, diplomacy, foreign investment, technology transfer, renewable energy, infrastructure, and sustainable development. Learning these words in the context of real-world examples makes it easier to understand and remember their meanings, while also giving you the to-follow international news, discussions, and academic content. Using this vocabulary in sentences and conversations can help learners become more confident in discussing global topics in English.
Another important lesson is the significance of understanding international relations, because it is not just about memorizing facts or dates, but about analyzing how countries interact, make decisions, and address challenges together. By examining the China-Brazil relationship, we see how trade agreements, diplomatic strategies, investment projects, and environmental considerations are all interconnected. This kind of understanding allows learners to see the bigger picture, recognize patterns, and appreciate how decisions made in one part of the world can have effects on distant regions, economies, and societies.
In conclusion, dear listeners, the partnership between China and Brazil offers valuable insights for anyone interested in global affairs, economics, and diplomacy. It highlights the benefits and challenges of international cooperation, the importance of balancing interests, and the role of strategic thinking in creating long-lasting relationships. For English learners, it provides rich content to practice listening, comprehension, and vocabulary, while also fostering a broader understanding of globalization and international relations, which are essential skills in today's interconnected world.
We hope that by following this podcast, you have gained both knowledge about the China-Brazil economic and political partnership and new vocabulary to discuss similar topics in English. Remember that international relations are not just abstract concepts. They influence trade, culture, technology, and everyday life around the world. Paying attention to these developments can improve your language skills, deepen your understanding of global events, and prepare you to engage confidently in conversations about the complex, interconnected world in which we live today.
Thank you for joining us, dear listeners, on this journey through trade, investment, diplomacy, and culture between China and Brazil. We encourage you to continue exploring international relations, practice the new vocabulary we have discussed, and think critically about the opportunities and challenges that globalization brings. Understanding these issues will not only improve your English, but also give you insights into how countries cooperate, compete, and grow in today's fast-paced and interconnected global economy.